So let's take a look at the sample project called CodePlay that came with the course. If we open that up by typing in code dot inside the CodePlay folder, we'll open up Visual Studio Code to that project. So this is a very simple Angular project, but the project's kind of irrelevant. We just want something to look at so we can explore Visual Studio Code. So first, let's say we're looking for a file called dashboard. How will we do that? We could click on the search viewlet over here in the view bar, and we could type in dashboard and hit the enter key, and we find everything that's got dashboard in it. Now there's all sorts of advanced search options you can choose, such as regular expressions and matching case. But we can see down here all sorts of different things that are containing the word dashboard inside of it. Of course, the very first viewlet is the Explorer, which shows us the working files and the folder we're in. If I happen to open a file, let's say we'll go and open up this Bower JSON file, you'll see the working file shows up over here, even if I close that file. And sometimes you end up with all those files and folders open really deep, and you just want to hide them. Right in the bar here, you can hit this button to collapse them all. The other buttons up here allow you to do things like refreshing the list or creating a new folder or a file, which you can also do right from right-clicking inside of here. And of course, we can drag and drop and move files around and copy and paste. Before we move on, one of the interesting things in here is notice that if I'm inside the working file and I start typing, let's say I type in here, hello world. I know that's not valid, but that's okay. When I type that up there, notice that this file doesn't show any icons to say whether it's been dirty or it's been saved or anything like that. That's because I'm using an option that's up here called Autosave. It's in the file menu and it's been checked on. I checked that. Let me uncheck that for a moment now and let me type something else in here like hello world, goodbye. Now when I do that, notice I've got a little dot next to the left-hand side of the word Bower JSON, and it shows one has been unsaved. So if you want to automatically save your files as you're typing, you can just click the autosave. But if you've got certain tasks that run automatically and you don't want that to happen, you can actually uncheck that for your project up here. I'm going to put it back on because I happen to like that. We're going to explore many of the options. There's so many more inside of Visual Studio Code that we can set up in a later section. But that one's kind of important, so we hit that now. Next up, let's look at this button here. That's going to show us the viewlet for Git Repository. Now this particular project hasn't been set up in Git yet, but I could just click this button here, set up Git, and automatically have a repository local, and then I can push that up to a remote somewhere else if I want to. We'll explore this a little bit more later too. And then this button's for debugging. That opens up the different debugging features such as looking at the variables, setting up watches, the call stack, breakpoints, all sorts of cool stuff we can do, as well as different debugging profiles that we can have. We'll explore how to configure debugging in a later section. So coming back over into our Bower JSON, we see we've got all this code in here. Now let's say we had an error inside the code. For example, I forgot a comma. Notice that it tells me right away that it was expecting some kind of a closing brace. And also in the bottom left-hand corner, you can see how many errors and warnings we have. And if I click on that, you'll see that there's an expected closing brace up here. And if I highlight that, it'll show me where it is, right there in that file. So down on the left in the status bar, we've got our Git repository, which it hasn't been initialized yet. We've got our errors and our warnings. We work our way to the right, we can see what column we're actually on at this time. Now we can type in a column at the top in the command palette. If we type colon, let's say we type in 17. It'll actually highlight that line. If I change that to 19, it'll move down to that line. And yes, it will scroll for you. So if I go down to let's say 40, it goes to the bottom of the file. Let's fix our code up here. And now, moving right along to the right, we can see we've got our character set. We've also got what kind of line sequence do we want to use. And then a really important one over here is the language that we want to use. This is the mode. Notice it's detecting right now that I'm in a JSON file. Let's open up a JavaScript file and see what happens. Notice now it knows that it's JavaScript. And of course, if we open up a Markdown file, we can see it knows that it's Markdown as well. Well, we can change that mode up here and look at all the different kinds of files it recognizes. Things like CoffeeScript or Docker files, Java, JavaScript. It also recognizes Objective-C. And this list is growing all the time. If you have feedback for the team, you can click on the little smiley face in the right-hand corner. So you can say, how's my experience? You can tell them something about this. You can put your email address in and either submit a bug or request a feature, which is kind of cool right inside the tool. Now kind of working our way back up, we started at the upper left, went to the bottom, across to the right. Now let's go to the upper right. Of course, there's always the X in here so you can close a particular file. But in some files, there's context-sensitive other buttons up here. Up here, we can split an editor, so we can have two versions of a file. We can open two different files. So I can open up that gulp file on the right, the readme on the left, and then if I'd like, I can close the gulp file. But what if I wanted to go ahead and look at preview mode of this markdown file? Well, in this one, because it knows it's markdown, I can see I've got two readme files, and now I can hit this button over here on one of them. We'll click on the right-hand side, and I can change it, and now we can see that there's the generated markdown. So code has recognized the markdown, and on the right-hand side, we can see the output of that. So based on the file type you're in, you might see different buttons in the upper right-hand corner. And finally, we've got our menu items. Up in code, you can always tell if you're looking for updates up here. You can set your preferences through here, either user-based ones for just me or for the entire workspace on my computer for all the things I'm doing on my computer. There's also keyboard shortcuts, which are really handy, especially if you're used to different editors, and then user snippets. We'll be exploring all these throughout this course. Then we've got the file window, which has the basic normal stuff other than the autosave. We've got our edit window in here as well. And then under view, we've got our command palette, which is going to be Shift Command P on the Mac. This we're going to use extensively in here, and we'll explore in just a moment. We can also look at our errors and warnings. That's the same thing as clicking on them in the bottom left-hand corner of the status bar. Toggling full screen, pretty cool, so we can get rid of the menu bar on the top. And then the split editor, you can always just do Command/ to get that. And toggling the sidebar, that's kind of neat, so let's click on that and show you what happens. When we click there, you'll notice that the sidebar just disappears entirely, and I can hit the keystroke to get it back if I want to. But it's really great when you're trying to make more room inside of your editor. So let's go back up into here. We can also move the sidebar. Watch what happens here. Now, my sidebar is on the right, so if you like to read the other way, this works for you too, and again, you can collapse and expand it. So now here, we can move it back. And let's say you don't like the dark editor, you can go down to the theme. Go from themes, you can go from the dark right over to the light. We can also go backwards and forwards in our file history that we've been looking at of the different working files. We can navigate the history. There we can see the different files in that history. We can go up and down those files to open up a different one. We can go right to a file, a symbol, a definition, or a line. Definition being maybe a function definition, a line, of course, for self-explanatory. And a symbol could be something inside that specific file. Then, of course, we get the standard window and the help menus. Next up, let's take a closer look at the command palette.